So we've already looked at how modern religious theorists, particularly looking at European society and monotheistic religions, explain the origin of religion or why people believe the way they do. There's another branch of this, and this brings us back to some material that we looked at earlier in the course. And this is looking at primitive cultures as they were known at the time. And so my subtitle, White Europeans Mansplaining Why People of Color from Ancient Cultures Practice Religion the Way They Do, is intentionally snarky because it's the study of religion in many ways came out of the European Academy, came out of Cambridge University and Oxford, and these intellectuals who began to study culture in new ways. So the emergence of the study of sociology, which is a study of society, anthropology, which is the study of culture, and religion, which is kind of a combination of those two things, all came from the same kind of post-Darwinian late 19th century period. And post-Darwinian means after Darwin came along and explained that evolution was more to better way to explain what happened in terms of the emergence of humans than the creation by God. So beginning with a guy by the name of Edward Burnett Tyler, who was an anthropologist from Oxford and had the world's greatest beard and, of course, a high forehead, which is a sign of tremendous intelligence and good looks and tremendous character as well. You'll notice that Tyler came up with the idea that basically early peoples began to develop a sense of soul and a sense of otherworldliness from not only their experiences with death, but also their experience with dreams. And it was in these dream states or near-death states that people would find connection to animals or other things. And this then led to a belief in animism. And as animism, as we already know, is the idea that spirit pervades all things, right? The word animus means spirit. And so again, a world filled with spirit. So this idea that if everything has spirit, obviously that's going to lead us towards polytheistic religions. So he basically sees that the origin of this instinct to connect to other things coming from originally from the experience of death and dreams. Bishop Codrington, as his name suggests, was a member of the church, the Catholic Church. He was a missionary in Melanesia, in the South Pacific. And Bishop Codrington spent a lot of time with Melanesian tribes, and they spoke about something called mana. And so he used mana as this idea of there's something in the unseen world that they kind of intuitively connected to. So you're not going to get to religion by some kind of rational explanation. You're going to get to it by an emotional, intuitive, faith-based connection, which makes sense. This is a man of faith. He's looking at other peoples as having faith too in something larger than themselves. And so they all have, we all have this intuitive sense of connecting to larger things. We just call it different things. So Codrington was getting at this idea that the religious impulse is literally rooted in human nature. Max Muller, there's an umlaut over the U, was a German, obviously, and he spent a lot of time in India in the late 19th century. Also a nice, beautiful high forehead. I'm not going to make any more jokes about that, but he's again another white guy from Europe who's arguing that basically the way that the polytheistic gods came to be were basically personifying, making human the forces of nature. So this idea of personalizing natural forces and giving them names and then deifying them explains powers beyond your control. But primarily he looks at his explanation about the origins of religion, sees it coming from the natural world. Finally, we have a guy by the name of Schmidt. I don't know why his name's not on this slide, but anyway, Schmidt had the belief in original monotheism as also a man of faith. He believed that originally all early hunter-gatherer societies believed in a high God. So original monotheism is this idea that monotheism was the original form, but then local gods then emerged after that, created by that high God. So polytheism is basically the corruption of the original religious impulse. So obviously this is this very heavily Christian monotheistic theory that frankly is just an extension of his own belief system, kind of projecting it onto native peoples. But it had a lot of currency at the time. The final theorist is a guy by the name of James George Frazer. He was a scholar at Cambridge University. He studied mythology, studied religion, and he came to the conclusion that basically we are moving away gradually from magical thinking, that original native peoples tried to control natural forces by magic rituals and ceremonies and sun dances and rain dances. These were ways of trying to get nature to do what you wanted it to do. And after that didn't work, it was replaced by religion, which is going to a power above the power of nature to ask for things to happen the way you want them to happen. So religion is in some ways going above magic. It replaces magic in its way of a sort of way of explaining and how people go to get what they want. Finally, obviously, Frazer was living in a time where religion was being replaced by science in the late 19th century as a result of Darwin and other people who explained that basically you can understand nature very easily through your reason. You can control nature through medicine and scientific theory. You don't need religion at all. So he believed that eventually, just as religion had replaced magic, so science would replace religion. And eventually there would be no more religious people. So if you believe Frazer, basically if you were to come back in 1,000 years, you'd see a world that was really scientifically driven and not driven by religion. And that's interesting to think about how you think about these things. So to review, each one of these 5 men had a different theory, whether it was animism, the belief in the mana, the personification of nature, original polytheism, or efforts to control and understand nature happening in a progression. So there's a lot of different theory in here, and I just want you to think about which one of these things makes most sense to you, or do any of them, or do you just see it as a bunch of European guys essentially looking at European society and projecting it onto what they're seeing in other parts of the world. So I want you to think about those things and perhaps make an argument for the theorist that makes most sense to you, or perhaps supplement what we've already done with these 5 guys.